Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum, and I'm very excited about our guest today. He is the co-founder and co-CEO of Biggby Coffee, one of the largest, fastest growing coffee brands in the country with 350 locations. It's a very unique and exciting story, and I'm so excited to have on the show today Mr. Michael McFall. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you and even more excited to have the listeners hear a little bit about your story. Us people who live in Michigan are very familiar with the Biggby brand, and maybe some of us are already familiar with the story of how it was created, but really a special story in the world of business. But even more, I think the listeners are going to take so much away from just you as an individual, as a human, your approach to business, your approach to life. Super excited to have you as our next guest. And I wanted to start off by asking you about your personal experiences from many years ago. You've done so many unique things and did a lot of unique things, even as a young teenager. One of those being that you hopped on a ship and sailed around the world. And I'm just curious, what did that early experience, or maybe several of those early experiences, shape your worldview, not just personally, but maybe also down the road somewhat in business?
I think there's really three formative things in my childhood growing up, and I'll call childhood sub from college. How's that?
Yeah.
And so there were really three major things that were pretty formative. One was I did go on a program called Class Afloat. Class Afloat is the program still exists today. In fact, my son did it last year, and my daughter's doing it currently right now. And you go on a square rig tall ship, a sailing ship, for 9 months. And I sailed across the Pacific. My kids are in the Atlantic. They're staying in the Atlantic. So I was 15 years old when I got on that boat. And so it was that was just, I look back on that. That's crazy. It was crazy. But my parents always instilled a pretty significant sense of adventure in us. And they tell me today that they were terrified, but like when I was going at 15, they just gave me a whole bunch of confidence, and I went and I did that. And it really taught me, the thing that taught me was, no matter where you are in the world, everybody's doing the same thing. We're all looking for the same things. We're looking for some security. We're looking for companionship. We're looking for love. Everybody's doing the same things. We're all doing it maybe a little bit differently, but for the most part, we're all pretty similar around the planet. Because we went to a lot of different places and met a lot of different people. So that was a nice experience to come out of the gate with early at 15. I also studied in West Africa, which at that point in time was the least developed, poorest country in the world. And I did that my junior year of college. That was a real eye opener. Like, we live in America and we think that we take so much for granted here. And not everybody in the world lives like this, right? And so spending that much time in Sierra Leone and getting to know that culture and the people there as well as I did, was quite formative. And then the third thing I would say is, I was an athlete. I was an athlete. I was captain of my hockey team and my golf team my senior year in high school. Sorry, and we had really good seasons, had great experiences. I didn't play at a high level in athletics. My career in both sports ended pretty much in high school, but it was still very formative. Like, really, to be a leader of those teams and to do what we did was pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's a diverse background. And I just admire the courage of your parents, knowing that they were terrified. A lot of parents would have just succumbed to that own selfishness to keep you protected and safe. So I love that they were like, oh, we know this is best for him. We're gonna do it anyway and put our fears aside.
Yeah, my parents are they're a very significant through line in my life. I'm still very close to them, and they've been through every single piece of this with me. Everything that I've done, they've been with me and walking beside me, and that's been a huge part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing that. So let's talk about Biggby. Okay, it's this massive coffee company, but it all started for you working behind the counter as a minimum wage barista, and now you're the co-CEO. So let's talk about filling in the in-between details
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I think the story is, there's a little bit of a nuance to the story at the beginning, which is my business partner Bob Fish. He started the first store, and then I worked for him at the first store as a minimum wage barista. Then there in our historical lore, there is a moment when Bob and we sit down in classical interview style format because he was interviewing me to become a manager of the business, become a manager at the store, at the first store.
Yeah.
And I wasn't interested really at that point. I was on my way back to graduate school. We sat down to talk. It was a beautiful spring day in 1996, March of 1996. And we popped up and went for a walk. Like 4 hours later, behind the original store, which is no longer there, we shook hands and we agreed to start a new company together. And the formation of that company is the company that we own and manage today, and is Biggby Coffee. It owns the brand and it owns the rights to each one of the franchise contracts that we have and so on. So I didn't start the very first store. I did start this company. So that's a little bit of the nuance of the story. And then after we shook hands on that day, we've just been building it ever since. I mean, that's it, right? Like 30 years. This year was our 30th anniversary. And I can't believe it's been 30 years, right? It's just astonishing to me. But
Yeah.
it's been a real, people will ask me how we've been able to get the company to where it is today. And where it is today is I think it's 454 stores as of today. We're doing well over $350 million a year in revenue. It's a nice company. But people will ask how we were able to get it to get it to where it is. And the answer is one word for me, and it's focus. All we did for 25 years was wake up and try to sell one more cup of coffee tomorrow than we did today. Or every day it was just sell one more cup of coffee. And that was it. And an entrepreneur, the entrepreneurial ethos is to just get so distracted all the time and be chasing all kinds of different things all over the place. And we had those tendencies more so today. For the first couple of decades, it was just pure focus, right? Let's just build a coffee company. Let's retail cups of coffee. And that's it. So that's where we are. There's a ton of dynamics in the 30 years, but that's a quick story. We were going to build our own stores. We didn't have any money. We went out and tried to raise some money. It didn't go very well. We kept getting these phone calls about franchising. And it didn't take too many of those phone calls for us to think maybe we ought to consider this business model. Maybe we ought to consider franchising. We were very fortunate to have Mary Ellen Sheets, the founder of Two Men in a Truck, in the Lansing area. She was gracious enough to sit down with us and share her experience with franchising. She loved franchising. And so in 1999, we decided to franchise. We had 2 stores. And we were still doing a little bit of the hybrid model with building our own stores and franchise. And then we had these are rabbit holes. Each one of these rabbit holes I could dive down, but we ended up having a pretty significant relationship with Fred DeLuca, the founder of Subway, the sandwich shop chain. And he wanted to invest in our company. He wanted to buy half of our company. And we worked with him for over a decade trying to put that deal together. And at one point he had said to us, we got together with him maybe 4 times, I think, in person. And every time was just this like fountain of knowledge coming at us. And he said, Mike, listen, you're not really good at running company owned stores, and you're not really good at franchising. He goes, what do you think about maybe choosing one or the other? Like either, and he knew what he was saying, because I think we probably had about 60 stores at that point, and we weren't going to unwind those contracts. So basically what he was saying was sell your company owned stores. We had 9 at the time, and then just dive right into franchising. And so that's what we did. And from that point forward, it has been 100% focused on developing a franchise company, which is a very different business model.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There's probably so much to unpack there over 30 years. But I'm curious on that 4-hour walk, and that's a long walk, by the way. You had mentioned that before that, you weren't even thinking about anything along those lines, but you were focused on going back to grad school. So, what was said during that walk? Did you have an entrepreneurial itch that you wanted to scratch? Did it take convincing to get you to kind of agree to go forward in that business? What was that like?
Yeah, no, it didn't take convincing. I think my dad was an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was a professor at Michigan State. So that was my parents' background. And my dad was an entrepreneur. And so I lived inside of that world growing up. And remarkably, so many of my close friends' parents, like my best friend's mom, was a brilliant entrepreneur. And And I had so much of that in my life that it was almost like the default, weirdly, in my world, entrepreneurship. So it wasn't like I was intimidated by that in any way, starting your own company and building revenue and so on. So that it was natural. And I think a couple things were going on for me. One, it didn't take a rocket scientist to see what was coming in specialty coffee at that moment. Starbucks was rolling into Chicago. They were booming, right? A lot of the local independent coffee shops were doing really well. Coffee was brand new in 1996, specialty coffee. I saw that wave coming. And then my partner, so Bob Fish and Mary Roselle started the first store together. Mary was we were third 33% partners up until 2012. We bought Mary out in 2012, and Bob and I have been 50-50 partners since that time. But Bob and Mary started the first store, and they came out of the high volume breakfast business. And if you're familiar with the Lansing area, they were involved in the flapjack restaurants. And so these were really high volume breakfast places. So they brought the mentality of being a high volume restaurateur to coffee, which, again, I could talk for a half hour in terms of what that meant for us as a business operating minute in and minute out. But long story short, we were more efficient, we were faster, we were more consistent, our product was more consistent. Restaurateurs have a different mentality, and most people were running coffee shops like retail stores, cute, quaint little coffee shops selling coffee, right? Whereas we were running ours like high volume restaurants. And so those two factors had me interested. And then Bob and I, that we've talked a fair amount over the years about what the hell happened in that 4 hours. And I think a lot of it was just values alignment. Like, seriously, like we've been partners now for a very long time. We've never fought. We've been partners for 30 years. Bob's a very mature human being. He's very smart, right? And so I don't know. I think I would say values alignment, right? We wanted the same things.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that I wanted was I wanted to do, can I swear on this?
Sure.
I know. I wanted to do interesting shit when I woke up in the morning. That was my whole plan for life. So I never really worried about whether I was going to be able to feed myself or make enough money to retire. Like I always had a fair amount of confidence, and I wasn't concerned about just the sort of normal day-to-day stuff. I just wanted to do cool stuff, right? I really wanted to wake up in the morning and be excited about what I got to do. And here I am 30 years later, and I still wake up every day and I'm fired up, right?
Man, there's so much in there, so much value in there. And I think what you just described is unfortunately the opposite of how a lot of people go about their lives and trying to just check the boxes. So I appreciate that you say that. And reading up on you and, of course, learning more about you and having conversations with you, your life philosophy seems to be centered around people and purpose and kind of leading others from a place of love. How do you define love in the context of leadership and business leadership specifically?
I think this is how I would summarize it. I don't think that what I'm talking about or we're talking about as a company or what we're trying to do as a company, I don't think it's very different than what's been going on for the last, 50, 100 years. Meaning, I think love has always been a integral part of good leadership. And we just are calling it love now, right? Years ago, you probably wouldn't have called it love. But good leaders, to me, truly good leaders they have an enormous amount of love for the people that are within their organization. And they want the best. They want the absolute best for the people that are within their organization. And there's been ebbs and flows on that over the years, of course, and things come in vogue and out of vogue and so on. But it's my philosophy that at the end of the day, good leadership is about putting the people that are in your care at the front of what you're doing. That's the most important part of leadership. And we're calling it love, and it's a little bit of an awkward. It's one of those moments in the English language when you wish there were other words, but it is what I believe in, that it's the kind of love that isn't, it's like my dad. I tell the story when I was, I don't know, 12 or 13, my dad had told me earlier in the week that I had to rake the front yard. And I got up before I could play my game on Saturday. So I was planning on raking the leaves on Saturday morning, right? And then going to play my hockey game. And I got up on Saturday morning and there was 4 inches of snow on the ground. My dad wasn't going to back down from, and so I had to shovel the front yard first. And then I had to rake the front yard and get all the leaves off of it. And to me, that was a true act of love. It was probably hard for him. Like, it probably wasn't easy to see me out there shoveling snow off the grass in our front yard. But at the same time, that's a loving gesture to me. Like that, love isn't always soft and sweet and squishy. Love can be hard too. Love can be forceful and hard too. And to me, that's what leadership is.
Oh, 100% said. And I'm sure during those times, those 30 years, Biggby, there were times where morale wasn't at an all-time high. There's always adversity, especially when you're trying to do something great. Was there a specific incident or maybe even a turning point that made you start to really wrap your brain around this idea of culture and what needed to exist, kind of some of those unseen values that people don't talk about enough that needed to be in place for this thing to ultimately succeed?
Yeah, I used to have this really thick brick wall built up between me as a person and me as a manager of my business. And I didn't cross that wall very often. And I remember sitting in a meeting. It had to be 2013, 14, 15, somewhere in there, probably around 14, 15. And I remember looking around the room and realizing that the people in that room, there were people that were some of my most significant relationships I was going to have in my whole life. But yet, I was still maintaining this separation. And I think it was always this fear that I might have to do something and put those people in harm's way, that I always resisted a true relationship, a loving relationship. And what I mean is, at some point, I always had this notion that we were probably going to sell it. We sell it, we walk off with a big check in our pocket, and you leave everybody that works there to the wolves. And that I always was anxious about that. We've gotten through that now. We're never going to sell it. I shouldn't say never. Can't say never. We do not plan on selling it. We do not plan on selling the company. We are intending to. We're not sure exactly how it's all going to work right now. We've got a lot of learning to do, but we aren't planning on any kind of a liquidity event. And we're going to pass this company along into the future, and it'll be some combination of maybe foundations and or employees and or franchise owners, maybe, or farmers, or the world is going to own this, right? The people that built it are going to own it at the end of the day. And that's been nice for me, because now I don't have to worry about, am I going to sell it and leave people in harm's way? And so that was a real significant turning point for me, when I realized that the people in that room were some of the most significant relationships I was going to have in my entire life.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I love the vision for the company. You've put a lot of your philosophies and ideas and thoughts into a couple of books. You and I are both authors. One of yours is titled Grind, the other one is titled Grow. Talking a lot about entrepreneurship and leadership. But I'm curious, is there one misconception that entrepreneurs might have about leadership that you'd like to say here on the show that is absolutely inaccurate, false, not true at all?
A couple of issues I have with the standard vantage on entrepreneurship is that entrepreneurship is about starting, growing, scaling, selling. And that's sad to me. That's a sad proposition to me, because I guess the reason it's sad is the only reason you're starting the company as an entrepreneur is to walk away with a big fat check. And I don't appreciate that mentality. And I think that if we were to think about business a little bit differently and by the way, private enterprise, the corporation, it's the most powerful, these are the most powerful entities on the planet. They have all the money, they have all the smart people, right? And to start to think about the corporation as a means for positive social change, along with the value proposition of the product or service that you're selling in the world. And I guess I don't really understand why we don't make that transition as leaders. To me, if you are the manager or if you're the CEO of a corporation and you have one focus, and that focus is to increase shareholder value, which is it's the standard out there. What CEOs are supposed to do is increase the value of the company, increase shareholder value. If that is your proposition in the world, to me, that's not leadership. That's management. And what management is management of a single asset, and you're just trying to grow that asset. Leadership to me is having a significant impact on our community, on our society, social change, improving the human condition. That to me is leadership. So, in the positions that we're in, with all the resources that we have, the teams that we've built that are high performing, we can take on other challenges that don't necessarily have to prove out and be about maximizing the value of the company. And I think it's such short-term thinking, right? If all you're worried about is the value of your company. So to me, that is one thing that when you talk about entrepreneurship, it's probably the biggest piece of it. That's like, we have to change this. Like if every enterprise, every private enterprise, or public for that matter, doesn't need to be a private enterprise, but I think of public companies and they're so bound by reporting out to Wall Street every quarter that to think of them taking on a social endeavor is like mind blowing to me. But maybe someday. But if every enterprise took on one challenge, one thing in the world that they were passionate about, think of the impact. Think of the impact that we could have. And so I I know there's a story of a woman here in Michigan who owned a company. I don't have permission to tell her story, so I can't disclose who she is, but she owns daycare centers, and there's some astronomical number of families that can't afford diapers. Like it's way bigger than you would think. It's 24% of
Wow.
people with, I know, right? And don't quote, I guess but it's a big number, shockingly big number. And her company and her people decided that's terrible. We're just going to take that on, and we're going to work really hard to provide diapers. It's like they took on their thing, they're doing it, and they're having success, right? It's a little bit of maybe an unusual take on entrepreneurship, because you go to the university here in Ann Arbor and start talking about entrepreneurship, and man, they're talking about doing one thing: raising money, scaling it, and selling it, and walking away with their 50 million bucks or whatever the hell it is.
No, what you just said makes complete sense. In my mind, as you were talking, it just comes down to one really simple distinction. It's a focus on ourselves versus a focus on others, which is what you described in terms of leadership. In its simplest form, to me, leadership is just about helping others get what they want, right? And along that same vein, when your company, you talk about creating superheroes instead of employees. I'm just interested from your mind, from your perspective, what does that look like in practice on a daily basis in the stores? How do you help people become superheroes at Biggby?
I think it first starts with an understanding that everyone has superpowers. And our job as leaders is to create an environment that they unlock their superpowers and they begin to understand their superpowers. And when you do, that's when people start to thrive and flourish, right? Because they're starting to feel that energy and the superpowers and then that's how you end up creating superheroes, right? So I think that there's a couple of things that we have to be doing as leaders in order to allow people to unlock, right? One of which is we as leaders have to be aware of the fact that we're the single biggest ingredient in that person being able to unlock their superpower. And when you ask people about their experience working at a company, it's never about the company. It's always about the person they worked for. And people leave jobs because of who they report to, right? Or they love their jobs because of who they report. So we as leaders have to work hard to unlock people's supers. How do you do that? First and foremost, it starts with knowing that person. Like, you really got to know the person. You have to do your very best to connect with them and understand, their potential, understand their superpowers. And so, like, that's step one. And that's a hard step for a lot of leaders to actually, because when you actually get to know people, you really start to care about people. And that changes the game right there. That one small thing. It's not small, but that one step. Step two, you have to build an environment. I call it a tree fort. Like, you got to build this tree fort that everybody gets to climb into every day, and they get to work with each other and support each other. And that environment the environment's a critical component to the person's experience working within your organization and them online. It's more about your people supporting each other, not necessarily you doing anything other than creating the environment for them to support each other. And then the third piece is you got to give everyone a real understanding of the vision of what in the heck it is that you're doing, right? That they can buy into, or they don't have to. If they're not into diapers, they can go work somewhere else, right? Because maybe this diaper thing to them is silly and they want to go build rocket ships to fly to Mars. Who knows? But those three things are the three things that I talk about in relation to leadership. Is you have to be aware as a leader that you're the single most important ingredient to that person's success. Two, you got to build the environment for them to thrive and succeed. And three, you got to paint the vision, paint the future for them. If they're engaged in the company moving forward with you, what is that going to look like for them in 5, 10, however many years?
Yeah. Very well said, described. And I love how simple that 3-step process is. Simple, yet probably difficult for a lot of leaders to execute. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about how supportive you've been over the years in the sport, let's call it, of youth hockey and developing programs that enhance the experience for those young kids. What do you see are the biggest opportunities for youth sports today going forward?
What I'm committing myself to, and I've been working on it now for the better part of, I've been working on it for 5 years, but really in the last year, I've been throwing myself at it pretty aggressively. And that is to try to bring youth sports a little bit back in the direction of sports are for recreation and they're for fun. And essentially that means the creation of house league sports. And I've been blown away by the culture of travel athletics today. I've been truly blown away by it. And I never had a chance to play sports at a high level, right? That doesn't mean that I didn't get a ton of value out of playing the sports that I played. I play hockey today. I'm 54 years old. I got a game tonight. I'm going with both my brothers playing the team, right? It's like my favorite night of I play twice a week, and these are my best friends. Still today, they're my best friends. And that's the value of sports. But what's happening is sports has become like an avenue, not necessarily for the health and vitality of the child, but it feels like that the sporting culture is almost like parents trying to prove out something in relation to maybe what they missed out on or something. It's this convoluted thing, but like, what are we doing to our kids? Single sport athletes at 10 years old? At 10 years old? I've been spending a lot of time on this, and a friend of mine was over on Saturday, and he's a football coach at the Division I level, and he was saying that he believes that there's one goal, and that is that the kid still wants to play the sport in 1 year, and they're excited to play it in 1 year. And he said it transitions at some point. Like maybe if you're
Yeah.
going to play at Division I college, it's okay. It's not really about fun anymore. Like it's a job at that point. But you accept that going in, right? You accept a D1 scholarship. You now that college athletes are getting paid, it's a job. College athletics is now a job. But like up until that point, the objective should only be, does the kid still want to play in a year? Are they excited to play? Do they want to show up to the rink or to the field or to the, and so I'm super passionate about it. There's some statistics that are mind boggling to me that are going on in the world right now. And I believe that athletics is a way to counteract some of the unhealthy stuff that's going on in the world. I go to the rink and it's like one of the only places that I don't see kids going like this with their phones. It's like
Yeah.
they don't. They're playing. They're having fun. They're throwing tape balls at each other. They're climbing all over. I think athletics, to me anyway, is one of the things that we can do to counter so much of what, in my opinion, is unhealthy about growing up as a kid today.
Yeah.
But we got to do it in the right way. It's not about taking a kid 9 years old and turning him into a professional athlete. Like that's not the answer, in my opinion.
Yeah. I have to share this. I'm no comedian, but I saw this video clip of this stand-up comedian. He was talking about this travel subject, and he said he thinks the culprit of this whole thing are dads who actually never made it to the big time.
There you
And
go.
they tell the kids, it's just a game, it's just a game, it's just a game. But you know what? We're going to play 90 of them in the next 60 days. And he also went on to say that you can go around the corner and get your butt kicked. You don't have to fly to Connecticut to do it.
Right.
So it
Well,
was
yeah,
very humorous, but I think right on point.
that's exactly the. There is no other option right now, though. At least in hockey, your kid either commits to like a crazy schedule, 30, 40, 50 games a year, skating on 3, 4, 5 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week, or there's really no other option. And that's what I want to create is I want to create another option, a house league option where you're not worried about getting cut from the team and your 9-year-old losing all of his best friends because he couldn't keep up playing hockey anymore, right? There's always a place to land. You're always going to be able to play. If you want to take a season off, you take a season off. You go play another sport or you play 2 sports. And yeah, you're making some choices once in a while that you have to go to football practice as opposed to volleyball practice or whatever it might be. So that to me is the culture that I want to try to create. And I'm very fortunate. I've got some really powerful partners on this thing. And here's what I've been telling people is that I think we all know it's a problem. No one's doing anything to solve it. And so that's what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to solve that problem.
I love it. I love the innovation and the leadership. So I love that. So excited for you in that endeavor. Also wanted to ask you about this word that you use, moonshot, which I think is describing a big dream or a big goal. And you yourself have one of those moonshots to someday possibly own the Detroit Red Wings, your hometown hockey team. But I'm interested for the listeners specifically, what does that say about really the power of thinking big? I think in the work that I do, sometimes people just put these self-imposed limitations on what they actually can achieve. So, how important do you think it is to actually say these big, almost absurd goals that we might have sometimes in a way that allows us or opens up the possibility within us to actually start down the track of achieving them?
I grew up in an environment where my parents encouraged us to envision, to vision. And we used to do exercises, like fun exercises. And I remember multiple times as a kid, like going through some of these exercises. And then the stuff comes true, and you're like an 11-year-old kid, and you're like, what just happened? Are you?
Yeah.
And so visioning has always been a big part of my world, of my life. And the moonshot I'm going to blank out. In E-Myth by Michael Gerber, it's your primary aim. It's the big, hairy, audacious goal in Jim Collins's book. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But we call it the moonshot. And it's like you go ahead and you just land this thing that if you could accomplish one thing in your life, like what would it be? But the real magic is that you begin to communicate that to the world. Because when people in the world, if they know how to support you, people will. They want to support you, right? And so all of a sudden when you're communicating this in the world, then You start to, I don't know how much of an advocate you are on visioning, but like the world starts,
Big.
yeah, the world starts to support you in your endeavor. Just if I knew what yours is, Bill, I'd be happy to try to support you in any way I can. It might be some small little thing that I could do, knowing what your vision is or what your target is, what you're going after. But if a bunch of people support you in little ways, we're supporting you in getting to that thing, right? And communicating it to the world is critical. So I got a funny story. So when my first book came out, the Detroit Free Press did an article, and the JC Rendell was the journalist that interviewed me for the article. And he has a reputation of being a journalist, right? He's going to tell the truth. He's not going to, he doesn't write, he's known as I don't want to say difficult, but a good journalist, right? So my PR firm, they're like, okay, Mike, so listen, stick to the questions. Don't go off script. Stay in it. Standard advice from your PR firm. So I go. We meet at Biggby Coffee in Farmington, and I end up spending like 2.5 hours with this guy. Right? It was supposed to be like a 30-minute interview. 2.5 hours later, we got along great. I mean, the guy's smart, right? The guy's going deep on lines of questioning about the business and so on. Anyway, long story short, the article comes out on Sunday. It was a Sunday edition. It was the front page of the business section, top banner, and it says, "Biggby CEO drinks 14 shots, or I've got a picture of it. Drinks 14 shots of espresso and intends to buy the Red Wings," is essentially the headline, like the coolest headline in the history of the world for me. That's just unbelievable. And if I told him everything, I told him how I wanted to buy the Red Wings. I told him about my whole plan on visioning, and that was my moonshot. I told him, yeah, I drink 14 shots of espresso a day, on and on. And so I can't tell you the positive impact that one article had. So many people. I do very little in the world without somebody bringing up the fact that I'm going to own the Red Wings. I got a long way to go before I own the Red Wings. Right? Like I am a long ways from that, but it's still part of my life. It's still part of what's going on inside of my world. And like that to me, I almost don't know what it would be like not to have a big dream, not to have a crazy dream. And it doesn't have to start out as big and crazy. They can start out, visioning can be smaller, like it doesn't have to be own the Red Wings. It could be, I'd really to spend 2 weeks in Hawaii in the next 2 years on a vacation. Let's get that going. Let's work towards that. Let's make that a thing. So to me, visioning's always been a huge part of what I do. I've got some stories that I tell that I don't think people believe them, but I swear to God, they're true. Like, for example, I was going through a difficult spot in my life. I was divorced, single dad, but I wanted a relationship. I wanted a family, right? My younger brother knew that. So my younger brother sits me down. He says, "So we're going to do this visioning thing, Mike. We're going to get a piece of paper out." He goes, "Give me every single thing that you want in your future partner." I do. I mean, I give him come up with 18 things.
That's it?
Well, there's a great joke in there, right? I'll tell you the joke in a second. Anyway, I go on my first date with my current wife. And by the second date, I figured out she checked 17 and a half out of 18. And that's visioning right there, right? It was like I was putting out in the world exactly what I wanted. And it came back at 17 and a half out of 18. And we were married like 6 months later, and we're married 13 years later, right? But the great joke my wife has over me is, she'll say, "You didn't put nice on the list." You know what? When we get in a fight, we're all mad. She goes, "You didn't put nice on the list." I'm like, I wish I would have.
That's great.
Yeah. So anyway, a long-winded answer to your question, but to me, visioning is just such an important part. I have to believe that as an athlete, you were doing that stuff constantly, right? Like always visioning. And
I started to get to it at the end. Nobody told me to do it, and it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. But yeah, I definitely saw some benefits of that and certainly have since. And I love what you just brought up. Some people call the universe responding the unseen forces. And too many of us actually are waiting around for a sign before we start acting, when in actuality, it's the opposite. If you put it out there, then the signs start showing up afterwards. So grateful that you brought that up. And for all of your thoughtful answers, Mike, this has been absolutely awesome. I can't wait to break down this episode because there's so much value in here. I know we could talk for another 2 hours. or I should say, you could talk and I could just listen and soak up all the knowledge. Love the energy, love the wisdom. But for the listeners, tell them where they can follow your journey, your pursuits, grab your books if they want, and where can they connect with Mike McFall?
Yeah, it's the social medias, right? LinkedIn's probably the most efficient, easiest way to find me. I've got a website, michaeljamesmcfall.com, and it's standard stuff. My email is mike@biggby.com. My cell phone numbers are in my books, right? So yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me, and but happy to engage. I do a fair amount of that, and I enjoy it. It's not like I get 25 texts a day or whatever. It's pretty uncommon, but I always enjoy people sharing their stories with me and being able to engage. I think it's fun.
Yeah, you don't strike me as the person who would shy away from these types of conversations.
No.
Love that. I was going to ask you what your favorite coffee drink was, but you already spilled the beans on that. 14 shots of espresso. I think it's
Yeah,
pretty memorable. I don't think anybody will forget that.
that's it. But it makes you smarter. Coffee makes you smarter.
Now, do you drink all those at once or you spread them out
No,
throughout the day?
I actually drink Americanos. So I
Okay,
drink, it's like a 4 ounces of espresso in a 16-ounce cup. And then I'll have 3 or 4 of those a day. So some days it's
gotcha.
3, some days it's 4. It's actually not that much caffeine. It sounds crazy, but drip coffee has a lot more, by volume, has a lot more caffeine than espresso does.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. See, I
Yeah.
learned something new.
Yeah, yeah. So it does sound like a lot, but it sounds like a lot, but it's actually 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day. It's not crazy.
Gotcha.
Don't tell anybody that though.
We'll keep it between us. Thanks so much for being here, Mike. I really appreciate it. And best of luck to you, not just with Biggby, but in all of the other future endeavors. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate you having me. This has been great.
Okay, take care.